Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for jumping on here today to join me for this pretty brief webinar that we're going to discuss California trash provisions and get you up to date with what's going on with California and the trash capture. My name is Phil O'Neill. I'm with Hydro International, one of the stormwater specialists. I cover the western states for Hydro International, but today's webinar is going to be specific to California. If you're on this webinar right now, chances are you're from California. I did a webinar going back about a year ago on trash capture that was a national webinar. If some of you were in attendance for that, some of these slides that I'm going to be showing are going to be familiar to you. But when we get into the meat of the presentation, we'll be talking specifically about California. So just a brief overview of what I'm going to cover. I'm going to talk about Hydro International, who we are, what we do. We're going to talk about the trash problem in general. And again, those are the slides that maybe you might have seen if you attended the webinar last year. But then we're going to jump specifically into California regulations, what the California Water Board is doing, as well as vector control to approve products on their approved list for meeting the trash provisions. I'm going to talk a little bit about our newly approved products that we have with Hydro International with the state of California, about sizing and some of the changes that are being done with the state and how they like to see things sized, and obviously talk about maintenance, because any of these products that we talk about do need to be maintained in order to be functioning properly. So Hydro International, we're really a water management company. I deal in the stormwater division, but we do have a wastewater division. We also have an industrial division. So if you have any projects that fall under those categories, feel free to get in touch with me. I can put you in touch with my colleague, appropriate colleague that covers that segment of the industry. We're truly an international company. We have installations all over the world. We have multiple locations of hydro offices as well. Our corporate offices are based in the UK, but for America's Stormwater Division, we're based out of Portland, Maine, and we have our wastewater division all the way across the United States, just outside of Hillsboro, Oregon. And one of the things that separates Hydro International from all of the other companies is we're really a water treatment company first, and we develop all of our own technologies in-house. We continue to improve on our products and work in our world-class laboratory to come up with new products and or improve on our existing products in order to help you with your water quality needs. We have a vast array of different stormwater devices for depending on what your regulatory requirements are and or the pollutants that you're going after. This is just kind of showing you all of them, but specifically today, the pollutant we're going to be talking about is trash. Now, these are some of the slides that maybe you'd seen if you joined me for the webinar a year ago on trash, but just want to go through the problems with trash. Obviously, it's a very unsightly thing. None of us like to see trash on the sides of the roads or in our communities. It can pose public health threats, and obviously it's a huge economic harm to cities and the state. And how much does it cost us each year for us to be able to clean up all of that trash? Just an example, last year, the city of Los Angeles spent over $30 million cleaning up homeless encampments. And the state of California, when you combine all cities and their costs, is over $436 million per year in cleaning up the trash. So it's obviously a very big problem that we do need to address and think about. And none of us need to like to see any of these types of pictures. We know that one of the main things that gets into the ocean is plastics, and everything that we can do to capture trash on land and avoid it from getting into the waterways is obviously going to be a good thing. So some of the not so fun facts about trash, and I hate reading these, but it is a problem and it's something to be addressed and looked at. But we've produced over 18 trillion pounds of plastic since the 1950s. That equals the size of 1 billion elephants, and that's pretty horrific when you think of it that way. 18 billion pounds of trash ends up in the ocean each year. And out of that, 70% of it is actually plastic. And 80% of that trash originates on land. So everything that we can do to capture that trash on land before it gets into waterways, before it gets into the ocean, is obviously the best thing that we can possibly do. And it's estimated that by 2050, there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish. I'd like to think that all of us that are on this are thinking that we can definitely avoid that by doing what the state of California is doing, implementing trash programs to be able to capture it on land and avoid it from getting into the waterways. Now, we have 5 garbage patches that I'm sure you've all heard and read about throughout the world, but the one that we think about here in California, at least, is going to be the one right off our coast, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch between California and Hawaii. And that's grown significantly over the years. And at this point, it's actually twice the size of Texas. So it's a significant problem, something that needs to be addressed, something we need to think about and how we're going to clean that up. And luckily, this young man from the Netherlands, Boyan Slat, came up with a pretty brilliant idea in order to ways we were going to be able to clean up these garbage patches. And you can see his prototype behind him in this picture. It's almost like a big inflated tube with a long hanging skirt underneath it. And you can see that the chains and the weights holding it down. And that's basically to try to corral these large garbage patches and have a way for us to be able to clean it up. But as much as it's such a great idea, brilliant for the kid to come up with it, there's definitely was some problems. I mean, when they launched the deployment of these devices, he's got 60 devices at a cost of $360 million. So it's not a cheap proposition. And what looks good on paper might not necessarily be exactly what works in the real world. When they launched these, they had some failures. They found that the turbulence of the ocean and the winds that they get out in the middle of those channels were just too severe for it, and it broke it apart. When they went out after about 3-4 months of it being deployed, they found that a lot of it was broken apart. The other thing that they found too is that it was designed to move with the currents, just like the plastics, but they found that the plastics were actually moving faster than his device. So back to the drawing board, they've gone. They're trying to do some tweaks in the design. Hopefully they'll come up with something that'll be able to be used and be able to get that all that plastic corralled and get it out of the ocean. So now I'm going to jump into, we talked about the problem of trash. We're all aware of it, but I'm going to specifically start talking about the California trash provisions. But before I go into it, I wanted to launch a poll to have each of you respond to. Let's see if this launches here. So the poll is, what percentage of your water quality projects have implemented trash provision requirements? So just on a percentage, if you could put how many of you are thinking about trash and how much of it is becoming a more prevalent in your design and your thought process. And I'll give everybody a moment to fill this out so we can see what the results are. And just give it a few more minutes here. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. And then we're going to share the results here. So interesting to see that 25%, less than 25%, and 50%, 75 to 100%. That's very interesting to me because I've been doing and talking about trash for about 3 years now. And it seems that when I would do lunch and learn presentations at engineering firms 3 years ago, I would ask this question and pretty much nobody was thinking about it. So this poll really tells me that it's becoming more and more on people's minds. People are aware of the new California trash provisions and how that works. So very interesting. I'm glad to see that. So now we're going to talk about California trash provisions, and seeing based on that poll, I think that a lot of you are starting to think about it. A lot of you might be aware of it, but we're going to talk about some of the changes that are happening as things have progressed with this program. So I can get this to advance here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about regulatory terminology, and from here on out, when we talk about full trash capture, we're going to talk about the trash provisions. That's more really what it is on the state level. And one thing to not confuse is 0 TMDLs to not be confused with full trash capture or the trash provisions by the state water board. The water boards are generally concerned with basically the first flush event. That's treating the first 1 hour and 1 year storm. And generally it's about a ½ inch per hour intensity. They know that some trash is going to escape from these systems when they go into bypass mode, but that's just something to be aware of, that this is not about capturing everything and holding everything. This is about getting that first flush and meeting the water board requirements. And this is a timeline for how this trash provision has come about. So back in 2015, new trash amendments were effective, and most municipalities were put on notice that this was coming. Municipalities had to decide which way they were going to go in order to become compliant with the state's trash regulations. And they would either pick track 1 or track 2, and that needed to be submitted to the state by December of 2018. Now, they don't have to be fully compliant until 2030, but that's when most of the cities, municipalities were starting to think about it, and they decided which way they were going to go. When you look at the difference between what is track 1 and track 2, well, track 1 is install, operate, and maintain full capture systems for all storm drains that capture runoff from the priority land use in their jurisdictions. So that's utilizing full trash capture devices like the ones that Hydro International manufactures. Or you could do track 2, which is kind of a combination of the two. It's utilizing catch baskets, inlet filters, maybe our large devices, increasing more men on the street picking up trash, maybe more street sweeping, increase your street sweeping program, that kind of thing. So most municipalities try to figure out what would be most beneficial to them, most cost effective, and they put that into the state on which way they are going to go. Now, when we talk about how this all came about, in the very beginning, when manufacturers filled out an application for their device to be approved by the state, consideration to the mosquito and vector control really wasn't done right at the beginning. The state started approving some products without consideration to mosquito and vector control. That's changed drastically. Now, both the state water board are also working with mosquito and vector control for approvals for any devices that are being applied for. So that's a big change. We at Hydro International are working very closely with both of them. I'm in contact with vector control, I'm in contact with the state board, and I'm trying to stay on top of all the changes that are happening. As I've told many people, it's somewhat of a moving target right now. Some manufacturers that were grandfathered in and approved way back when might not be approved tomorrow. There are delistings that are happening off the approved list, so it's very important for you to stay on top of the water board approved list. And the other thing that's changing is they are now having considerations for device screen blinding, and I'll go into that a little bit more, but they're concerned with how these units actually function in real world once they're not being maintained properly. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that on another slide here. But one of the keys is for it to be approved, a product to be approved on the California list, is it has to have a 5mm screen. And then I'll talk about why that is in just a little bit when I show you the trash studies that we've done. But different devices have different screens, and 5mm is the bare minimum. Now, at the bottom of this screen here, you'll see a link, and that's the dated November 2020. That's the most up-to-date. If you Google California Water Board full trash capture devices list, you'll come to this. Hydro International currently has 3 on the list, which is our downstream defender with a 5mm screen, the First Defense with 5mm screen, and the upflow filter, which actually has a 4mm screen. Now you see 2 other columns off to the right there. The date application certified or fact sheet updated. That's the day that we got our product actually approved by the state. But the most important one to take a look at is the far right column. That's the date vector control accessibility has been verified. You can see that Hydro has verification on all 3 of our products. Now, if you go to that full list and you see all of the other manufacturers, you're going to see quite a number of them that have the word none in vector control accessibility. That means that they have not gotten vector control approval yet. And what the state board is doing currently is they are sending a letter out to each one of those manufacturers that have a none in that category, and they're giving them 60 days to apply to vector control to have their device approved. And we'll talk about what vector control does and why that's important. But very important for you when you do take a look at this list, pay attention to the ones that have the none next to it, because they might not be on the list in the very near future. Now, vector control, what they do is they're treating for mosquitoes. The mosquito problem is a big deal. And before I got into this, understanding of all the nuances of these approvals, I wasn't really aware of mosquitoes and how big of a problem it really was. And I've learned a lot over the years. But when it comes to approval of a product, it has to be approved by the state, but it also has to be approved by the Mosquito and Vector Control Committee. And for approval for vector, it's based on 2 things. One is treatability and one is accessibility. So in order for the vector people to do their jobs properly and treat for these devices, they don't want to have to climb into a structure and actually have to remove and disassemble parts. They don't want to have to lift heavy hatches. They want to be able to pop the manhole lid, look down into the device and see, is there standing water in there? Do they see mosquitoes? Can they drop in their pellets and whatnot to be able to treat the water? So those are the things that are important to them when they look at a device. They don't want to see a device that has, a big screen blocking their ability to get in and do their job properly. So when I talk to Vector Control and ask them, what are those ideal designs? One is unobstructed access to drop in their tablets. If you look at the top right picture on this slide here, that's a picture of one of our downstream defenders in Echo Park, Los Angeles. And we did a travel day with Vector Control. This was that same day, and let them inspect some of our units that were in the field. They liked this one. As you can see, we popped the manhole lid. You can see right through that center shaft. You can see the standing water at the bottom. Very easy for them to be able to see. There's nothing hindering them from being able to drop in their pellets. And they gave us the green light on the downstream defender. They like that device. The other thing they like to see is either some sort of a hatch door or retractable door that doesn't require any confined space entry. That bottom right picture there is a picture of one of our hatches that we put onto our Hydro DryScreen. And I'll talk about that in a couple more slides, but they do like that in the fact that they can just reach down with a simple hook, lift that little 1 foot by 1 foot hatch, and be able to access and see the standing water in the sediment zone of this DryScreen. One of the other things that they mentioned is that they would like to see solid manhole lids. They don't want to have any pick holes that could give access for the mosquitoes to be able to go in and out of the storm drain system. And then ultimately, they'd like to see no standing water. And obviously, we know that that can't happen all the time. Standing water happens whether it's in a manhole with nothing in it, and it can even happen in the belly of the pipe, maybe 100 feet down horizontally from the manhole where they could breed. So mosquitoes can breed in anything as small as a water bottle cap. So that's as little amount of water as they need in order to breed. So it's they want to be able to have as much no standing water as possible. So this is just a case study that we did in Monterey. I worked with the city of Monterey for a couple years in helping them in their decision making on how they were going to meet California's full trash capture. And they decided, after analyzing all the different units, to go with the hydro DryScreen. The reason they went with that is they felt that it was a great unit to have only a couple different points of maintenance, and be able to hold a large amount of trash and debris in one area for one point of maintenance. I worked closely with them with doing drop-in inlet filters for years when I was with another company prior to Hydro. They were considering putting in inlet filters all over the city. That would require a whole bunch of different maintenance points, a lot of man hours to be able to maintain all of those. So what they did with these is they found two low points in the city to where all the water flows to, and they installed these hydro DryScreens. You can see on the left picture there, we retrofitted our existing DryScreen with a 5mm screen. The other thing that we did is we added that hatch. There's the picture that I showed you before on previous slide. That hatch is for vector control to be able to get in there. Now, as I said, things have been somewhat of a moving target, and ironically, we had the hydro DryScreen on the approved list for full trash capture with the state, but at the same time as we were having this installed, vector control decided to delist us with this device, not having seen our new design with the hatches. So currently, the hydro DryScreen is not on the approved list, but we are going back and reapplying. So this device hopefully will be back on the approved list very soon, because we made the changes that vector control asked for by adding the hatches. So that's what I'm saying about, manufacturers are going to be doing what they can to tweak their existing products to be able to appease the vector control people. So make sure you stay on top of those lists. With Hydro International, we do have some newly approved devices I just wanted to make sure you were aware of. This is our first defense unit. Previously, we never did have any screens in our device, but you can see on that left picture, left rendering, there is a vertical screen now that goes over the bypass weir that's going to capture trash. And there's also, it's a little harder to see, but there's another screen horizontally in the outlet chute. And so if any water or trash gets up that outlet chute, it was going to hit that 5mm screen and keep it within the structure. Vector control likes this unit again, just like the downstream Defender, has that middle open shaft down the middle, so they can easily treat any standing water, and they can easily see anything that might be below. Now, this is where some of the changes are happening at the state. And as a design engineer, when you start thinking about sizing for trash, it's just a different frame of thought than what you've always done in the past. And that's generally sizing for TSS removal. So we're not talking about TSS. This is off of our sell sheet for our first defense. And we provided this to the state, and I think that they really liked it, because they now are saying that they're going to start asking most manufacturers to come up with some sort of a chart like this. We did this with HydroCAD modeling, but we're giving them information, real information on what happens when the unit is not maintained. We all know that what the flow rates are going to be when it's perfectly clean, there's no trash inside, there's no leaves inside, and that's what the flows are. Well, this chart here, if you look at, say, our 4-foot FD4HC, at 0% blinding, which means that it's been perfectly maintained, there's nothing in there, we can treat 7.94 CFS. But as the unit starts blinding and you get more debris in the system, obviously the flows that you can treat are going to go down. And so what the state wants to see at bare minimum from all manufacturers moving forward is, what can your system handle and treat at 50% blinding? So you can see with our 4-footer, we would be able to treat and handle 5.27 CFS. And we still have the bypass at 18 CFS, but that's real world of what we would be treating for that first 1 inch, 1 hour. So again, just a lot different way of thinking, a little bit different way of sizing moving forward. I believe we're going to be developing a new sizing tool specifically for trash capture in the near future. So that's something to be kind of looking forward to from Hydro International. And as we talked about, performance is affected by the blinding. Obviously, the more that gets in there, the slower it's going to go. And there's definitely some screens that can be designed in such a way that they blind more slowly. We actually have a new product in development right now that hopefully we will be launching later this year that we think is going to be able to provide longer periods of maintenance between maintenance cycles and allow flows to get through very easily and allow vector to be able to do their job and be able to treat. So we think it's going to be a very good product coming out later this year. And Hydro International, I mean, we have vast experience with trash and understanding maintenance. We have our own maintenance division. We maintain any and all BMPs. So at the end of this presentation, if you've got any concern or questions about costs of maintaining any BMP that you might be specifying, please feel free to reach out to me and I can put you in touch with our maintenance division. But as I said, we understand trash very well. We've been doing trash studies for many, many years. This last year, obviously 2020 happened and it didn't allow us to do our normal yearly trash study. But I'm just going to show you some of the trash studies that we've done in the past to show you the experience we have with trash. We based our trash studies based on the Friends of Los Angeles River studies and conducted it basically the exact same way they did. We gathered all the trash just like they did, and we divided it into different categories, 11 different categories, to find out, what are those nuisance pollutants, the biggest problems that we have to deal with. Over on the right-hand side, the chart there, that's from the California Coastal Cleanup Day, and they did basically the same protocol that the Friends of Los Angeles River did, in that they gathered all the trash, they divided it up, and they figured out what are the biggest nuisance problems. And as you can see in that chart, number one at 37.76% is cigarette butts. And that's where the 5mm screen comes from. It's going to be able to capture a cigarette butt and larger. About 45% of the rest of those pollutants are food and beverage. And find that very interesting because when you look at some of the studies that we did, we found that we mirrored the same thing, even on the other side of the country. This is where we conducted our trash study at Main Mall in the city of South Portland, and the southeast corner there, approximately 1.8 acres of area. And this is just showing all of our staff out there on the cleanup day. This is from 2019. Again, we didn't do it this last year, but we had 22 volunteers and we collected 261 pounds of trash. And we did the same thing that the Friends of Los Angeles River and the Coastal Commission did, and that we took all that trash and we divided it out. And you can see we started this back in 2016. That was our first year. That's the blue line. And probably because that area maybe never had 22 people go in and clean stuff up, that's why the numbers are probably so high. It was a kind of a heavily polluted area. And you can see those numbers drop on most as the years go on. But we did find that it mirrored very similarly to the trash study on the West Coast, in that a lot of it is food and beverage. And yeah, it's just very, very interesting study. So just to wrap up this brief webinar, the product requirements for satisfying the California board for full trash capture, you need to also think about vector control. Make sure that any devices that you might be thinking about using, that you're specifying, meet both the water board and vector control approval. And again, if you need that link or if you have a problem finding it, if you Google it after this webinar is over, please feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call. My phone number will be popped up at the end here. And just know that we're working closely with both of those parties. So any changes that are happening, I should be very well aware of it. I can be a resource to you. So if you have any questions about anything in regards to what's going on with trash, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help in any way I can. So, and if you do have maybe some staff that couldn't attend this today and you're interested in doing a virtual lunch and learn, I'm happy to do that as well. So I want to thank all of you for joining me today. Hope you guys stay dry. It's very wet out, so hopefully you're not out driving around today. Hopefully tomorrow will be nicer, clear, crisp day. But there is a post-webinar survey that's going to pop up. If you just take the survey, you're going to be entered to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And we're also going to be sending out PDH certificates by Friday this week. So look for those in your email. So again, I want to thank all of you guys. Hopefully everybody's staying safe, stay dry. My phone number is right there on the screen, so please jot it down and feel free to give me a call if there's anything I can do for you. And I look forward to hopefully seeing people in person very soon. Thanks again for attending.